boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
It's how the mighty have fallen for Jack. Should be a 4-belt champion.
Agreed.
Didn't get that. Took forever to drag Josh back into that rematch.
Agreed. No
Got no
hours.
reward for that, really, besides the fact that ultimately he laid a ghost to rest.
Yeah.
Right? Has to fight Linares. Okay, it's an aging Linares, but still a dangerous Linares. Has to fight Regis Prograis. Then has to go into one more fight than I think he should have had to go into for a world title. And his reward now is he gets handpicked by Harlem Eubank.
Simon was bang on the money.
Simon says
You went through the dodgy decision loss to Josh. Should have been a 4-belt undisputed champion. Then had to fight Linares, Regis, etc., etc. For long periods, Jack seemed to be sitting it out, waiting for a Josh rematch, which he got, which he won, for no title. Then to lose to Barboza in an eliminator. And now you're getting cherry-picked by Harlem Eubank. And he's spot on the money. Now, Jack and Sam Jones might say, well, we didn't get cherry-picked. We asked for the fight. It's a big fight. It's against a Eubank. They're a very popular name. Chris Eubank Sr. and Jr., yeah. Harlem Eubank, is it that big? A big fight for hardcore boxing fans in the UK. There's more to gain for Cali and Harlem than there is for Eddie and Jack Catterall. Harlem Eubank's team, he's trained by someone who's just under Adam Booth from that stable. They're looking for a fight like this right now. Harlem is 31, unbeaten. And did you see the shape he was in today? And it's the eyes. Did you see his eyes? It reminded me of the Rocky film when Apollo Creed's trainer was looking at the TV screen where Rocky was punching the meat in the locker in Philly while Apollo was entertaining the press about the flogging he was going to give Rocky. I've already picked Jack Catterall, but this is not a good fight to take coming off a loss. I don't know how good Harlem Eubank is, but I'm willing to bet he can't be too far worse than Arnold Barboza, who I don't think is a good fighter. I think he throws better combinations than Arnold. I think the footwork looked really good last time out. There's been a mental metamorphosis in Harlem Eubank. I've been watching him since he was on MTK Global. I've been watching him since then. Yeah, I don't know if it's Senior's input since Harlem's old man passed on, hanging around with Junior, soaking up the big fight atmosphere with Junior when he's fighting Conor, and being around that setup, and him embracing that he's part of the Eubank story and really believing it. Senior speaks to him regular, managing and mentoring him, and has been telling him, you're going to fight for a world title soon. You're going to be in big fights soon. And he seems to have a renewed self-belief. Remember how long Jack Catterall had to wait for his shot at Josh Taylor? He allowed Josh to take on mandatories, had to wait for Josh to recover from injuries, and it took a long time. And he finally got his shot, and he vented his frustrations out on Josh and should have won the 4 straps. Well, Harlem Eubank, he's went through his frustrations. Ben Shalom strung him along for the Adam Azim fight. They were just using him to lie to the media that they weren't ducking Dalton Smith, but they were using Harlem.
when I come to Harlem.
Harlem and his uncle Senior called out Conor Benn. Conor Benn laughed it off and called him Harry, and everyone laughed it off. He's not in a dissimilar position from Jack Catterall, waiting for his opportunities.
I've been patiently waiting.
Do you know how hard Harlem trains? Because he hasn't had the success. Do you see Harlem doing that somersault from the floor through the ring ropes? Completes the somersault back onto his feet, throwing combinations on the mitts. This is an athletic, fast, confident athlete fighting Jack Catterall, coming off the worst performance of his career. If Jack beats Harlem, the world will barely blink. If Harlem beats Jack, different story. I believe Jack is a year older than Harlem at 32. Harlem no spring chicken at 31, but he's a young 31. He hasn't accumulated a lot of punishment. He's been living the life. Is Jack destined to be one of boxing's nearly men who through, I don't want to say bad decisions, but I always said he shouldn't have waited around for Josh Taylor. He shouldn't have waited around for the rematch. Here's the thing. Jack was scheduled to fight for his first world title in 2021. He didn't get a shot at the title until 2022. It's now 2025. The windows of opportunity to win world titles, unless you're George Foreman, who won the world title in the 70s and in the 90s, the windows are normally small windows. So basically I'm saying Jack was ready to fight for the title in 2021. If all goes to plan, he's probably not going to get a shot until 2026 or maybe late 2025. How long could he keep extending the window? He's had opportunities, he's had bad luck. Moments where he looked like a world beater. Moments where he looked like, yo, what's going on, Jack? But could he end up as one of the nearly men of boxing?
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
The backdrops, the lighting, the graphics, I don't think it really came off at the press conference for MATCHROOM. But the weigh-in, 2 separate scales, one of them weighs in, then you see the digital graphic weighing them in. I liked it. I think that worked. I think it was quite innovative. For some, maybe unnecessary. To me, it looked impressive. I think it was good. Joe Cordina returns to action after a long layoff, after that beating he took from Anthony Cacace, losing his IBF 130-pound title. And he chose this big punching Mexican who's in the same stable as the guy who beat Galal Yafai the other week. Maybe MATCHROOM spending too long on the logo and rebranding and digital technology than the matchmaking. They're taking some tough fights. I was exchanging dialogue with October Red on Twitter about it, and she said, yeah, he needs to box and move. Yes, he does, but, you know, as I said, you don't always get the option with Mexican fighters. They'll cut the ring off and make you fight. And Joe, in his last 3 fights, has kind of abandoned his boxing since he got that big KO over Ogawa to win the title. Kind of abandoned his boxing in his subsequent fights. He's with Gary Lockett, parting ways with Tony Sims. And they need to get their tactics spot on, because this looks like a tough fighter with a big KO percentage. Joe Cordina said he's taking the fight because if he fought somebody whose power he didn't respect, he's likely to switch off and take unnecessary chances. He says fighting someone he knows is dangerous, he's going to be switched on. He's not going to switch off, and that will improve his performance because he's going to be on guard. He can't be looking at this as a tune-up. I think it's going to be a good card tomorrow. On the domestic front, the MATCHROOM fighters are taking a lot of losses. Jack and Joe are coming off losses. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them lost tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised if one of them fights is a controversial result. Sky Nicholson's on the card. She's coming off a loss as well. She did look kind of hot at the weigh-in though. Just saying.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
So what is that? Maybe a 4 to 5 month turnaround from the first fight to the rematch for the now 35-year-old Chris Eubank taking on the 28-year-old Conor Benn. 7 years in this game can often be a big age gap, a wide age gap. It's a relatively short turnaround for a 35-year-old who hasn't been that active in recent years, who was hospitalized for 3 days or so after the fight, dehydrated. And he signed for 2 fights at 160 with the same contract, the same rehydration. Conor Benn the next day was fooling around like he was training. The day after that, he was in New York. His recovery from that epic battle was superior to Chris's, and the age has a lot to do with that. I remember my friend explaining to me when Eubank fought George Groves, and he was explaining how Eubank was able to take them heavy punches from George Groves. And it's basically a youthful cardiovascular that's well trained like Eubank's was will get hit, and when the brain is confronted by a blow that wants to make the brain shut down, that youthful cardio and respiratory system can feed the brain that vital oxygen to stop it shutting down quicker than an older athlete can. But Chris ain't that guy no more. 35-year-old cannot be next gen. You don't qualify for next gen no more. It's wishful thinking on Chris's behalf. Chris is a better fighter than Conor because of the experience. It's not even so much the size. Chris has been in with a tougher opposition. He knows what it takes to gut out a fight. Conor didn't. Chris will still be too experienced for Conor, I believe, in the next fight. But where Chris can come unstuck is through what I've been explaining. You took 3 days to recover from that fight, and the turnaround is relatively quick for modern day boxing. Because okay, he didn't get knocked out, but he was definitely concussed after the fight. His face was swollen up. He didn't want no one to see his face for a couple of days. He signed 2 fight contracts with the same stipulations and weight clauses to fight Conor Benn. And that's because of the money he's getting. He's prepared to go through the inconvenience of depleting himself because he gets to fight a smaller man for a huge bag. If it was all about belts and being a people's champion, he'd go and take on Janibek, wouldn't he? A proper size 160 pounder. Yeah, Chris could come unstuck because the next fight will start from the 13th round. This ain't a fresh start for Chris, this fight here. It's the 13th round. And if Conor can avoid getting pushed back to the ropes and stay in the exchanges just a little bit longer, if he matures into the 160 pound weight limit and is more comfortable there, this fight could go bad for Eubank Jr. And when I say bad, I'm not just talking losing. Because even though he beat Conor, he came out of the fight worse for wears. That's a serious red flag. When you beat somebody and you come out of the ring worse for wears, and you're 35 years of age, all Conor has to do is make some adjustments. Whatever adjustments he makes, what he feels necessary to make, could make this a potentially bad night for Chris Eubank. If Chris is going to win, it's more than likely going to be on points again, or he could stop Conor, but the power to me doesn't look like it's there for him to do a serious job on Conor. He could stop Conor, and Conor will probably reflect on what he's doing next and maybe try and boil back down to 147, or maybe try his luck at 154. But if Chris loses, which I don't think he will, but if he loses, or even if he wins, it's likely to be a life and death struggle like the first fight. And he could be seriously risking his health. But like his dad said, he's a money man. The fake fan base that he's acquired who blame Eddie Hearn on every decision that Chris makes for himself are the most idiotic, I need a hug from dad bunch of men I've ever seen. When they speak in my comment section and convince themselves that everybody's out to get Chris, they're such victims of life. You must fear for this country with a generation who just can't deal with accountability. First fight was an epic fight. It really was. Chris's pressure threatened to overwhelm Conor. But yeah, Conor had a great chin. You know why? Because Conor wasn't restricted by having to drain himself to make 160. He came well inside the 160 limit on the scale. I believe he'll take Chris's punches even better next time around. And he won't take as much. He also naturally hits very hard. And Chris was shocked that Conor could hurt him with single shots and make his leg do that funny dance. This fight is more intriguing than the first one as far as I'm concerned, because Conor is young. He hasn't got the career-defining wins and accomplishments. Chris doesn't have the career-defining accomplishments. But Conor more so, because he's 28 and still fresh, is likely to be a better Conor Benn than we saw last time. Can we really confidently predict that Chris will be better this time than he was last time, after spending 3 days in the hospital after the fight and this short turnaround? Chris knows this ain't a good idea, but he's lured by the money. And even if the money wasn't ruling his head, he'd be too prideful to walk away from it and have people think that he's scared to fight Conor. Phony fan base, this is why I call you phony. So let's say I had an issue with Conor Benn, with the pets. I will compartmentalize where Conor was at fault, in my opinion. But I won't carry it into further discussions about a fight between him and Chris. Like blaming Conor for the rehydration when Chris signed it himself. Like blaming Eddie Hearn for taking the fine for Chris when Chris knew the conditions. Like blaming Eddie Hearn for why you turned up late at the weigh-in and that's why you failed to make weight. Like rolling on the floor in your sauna suit trying to get public sympathy. And a lot of other fuckboy shit that Chris did. But a lot of people can't compartmentalize. You try to use things that don't relate to whatever Conor did with the Peds. You try to conflate that into other aspects of either Conor's life or discussing the fight between him and Chris. And that's just immature, ignorant, dishonest.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
No one
can do it better.
So a few people have addressed my last video saying you haven't acknowledged that David Benavidez' fight with Anthony Yarde will actually be for the full WBC title. I'll be honest with you, yeah? I don't think the boxing scene had updated the rankings when I was covering the story. He was still an interim champion with the WBC. He's an interim champion with the WBA as well. And obviously BoxRec do not record WBC title fights as WBC title fights. They're just fights. So I acknowledge that in some ways it's for the full WBC title. But even if I knew he had been elevated, I would have something to say. Like, David Benavidez said he's not going to fight in Riyadh against Dimitri Bivol. The fight's got to be in America. PBC got to be involved. His guy, Laukowitz, was saying the same thing. Turkey said, I'm not interested in the fight no more. Now all of a sudden, David has sold his soul and he's fighting in Riyadh against Anthony Yarde. It's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? So there's an argument that he ducked Bivol. Now you can argue in the comment section, he didn't duck him. Okay, cool. Even so, Dimitri Bivol is still lineal champion. Legitimately lineal champion. He hasn't ducked no smoke. He's a pound for pound fighter. One of the best we have in the sport. Why do you think it's that important to me, knowing that I value the old school analysis of these situations? As far as I'm concerned, Dimitri Bivol is still undisputed champion. And David Benavidez is a second tier champion. If he's the full champion to you, if he's on the same level as Dimitri Bivol as a champion to you, I'm not going to try and change your mind. That's your opinion.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
No one
can do it better.
USYK, middleweight.
knock this out. One take. Tyson Fury fans, they love to hate, but Tyson Fury got beat up by a middleweight. Yeah, I hit him up.
USYK, middleweight.
The man started quoting Tupac lyrics when USYK was laying into me that 9th round in the first fight. Yeah? Fury called Deontay Wilder a sore loser after the second fight, saying if he ever loses a fight, that he'll shake his opponent's hand and say fair play. Well, I haven't heard him humble himself and say he accepts the judge's decision to score against him in the USYK fights. I haven't heard him congratulate USYK for putting on a great performance or anything like that. I haven't seen this mass demographic of sports fans who believe that USYK didn't deserve his victories. I haven't seen it. If he wants to make arguments that he was robbed in both fights, why doesn't he make arguments that USYK was robbed of a stoppage in the first fight?
If I did come back, hypothetically speaking, if I was to return and I was to box Daniel Dubois, I would box that motherfucker's ears off. He wouldn't land the glove on me. It'd be a one-sided beatdown. But listen.
Well, John McDermott managed to lay gloves on you. Deontay Wilder laid gloves on you. A cruiserweight-looking heavyweight named Pikeetch laid gloves on you and dropped you. Steve Cunningham, a cruiserweight, dropped you. Derek Chisora put hands on Tyson Fury in the first fight. It was a competitive fight. All this BS that the pro-Tyson Fury media and his weak fan base talk about Tyson, the defensive genius who can't be hit. I spoke about USYK. You could argue he was robbed of stopping Tyson Fury. What about Otto Wallin? He caught Tyson with a left hook, a legitimate punch that cut Tyson's eye. And there was a few people saying that fight should have been stopped with a cut like that. USYK nearly put him to sleep in the 9th round and found him easy to hit. Now, like I say, I try and compartmentalize my analysis. There have been some good defensive displays, like the Klitschko fight. How much times did Wilder have him on the canvas? About 4 or 5 times in their 3 fights. Twice in their first fight. Second fight didn't lay a glove on him. Francis Ngannou put this guy on the canvas. So all this Daniel Dubois won't lay a glove on Tyson Fury, maybe so. But maybe Tyson doesn't lay a glove on Daniel and Daniel lays him out. He's been put on the deck by lighter punchers than Daniel and lesser fighters than Daniel. I'm talking about this version of Daniel coming into his own. IBF champion. The video was titled, The Reason Why Tyson Fury Hates Daniel Dubois. And Dubois didn't reply to the video, but they've segmented the video together. And he was discussing the time when he was sparring Hughie Fury and he dropped Hughie. And Tyson jumped in the ring to fight for the honor of his cousin. So Tyson's obviously had a beef with him. When Daniel got stopped by Joe Joyce, there was Tyson Fury talking about, well done Joe, boxing's a heart game, implying that Daniel quit. And the clip where he's saying he boxed Daniel Dubois' ears off, the motherfucker he called him, that was a recent video. He's probably upset that Daniel's a champion, a British world champion. And if he beats Alexander Usyk, something he couldn't do in 2 fights, he starts eclipsing Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. How the fuck are you going to talk about a comeback and ignore Daniel Dubois if he beats Alexander Usyk. So now you'll be ducking Dubois as well as Anthony Joshua for undisputed. He ducked Anthony Joshua for undisputed because Team Fury could have got out of the situation with the second Wilder fight. There was a clause in the contract where they could have got out of the fight. For undisputed this was. And he's never been an undisputed champion. There was people saying, oh, isn't it great that Tyson Fury's back? He brings excitement to the game. No, he doesn't bring excitement. Within minutes of him coming back, I'm reading articles. If I fight AJ, he gets 10% of the split. This guy is not the A-side. Dictated to the champion, Usyk, that he wants to fight in the UK. He's not the A-side. AJ still has more world title fight wins than Tyson Fury. Fury's got a decent resume, but it's not outstanding. What makes him get 90% of the split over AJ? What makes him think that Usyk has to come to the UK to fight him when Usyk's beaten him twice? It's just pure delusion. Frank Warren's got an interesting job on his hands, though. I think it's going to be hard to play both sides of the fence. Well, I support Daniel and I support Tyson. Let's see how that works. I don't think it's exciting he's back. He makes people infuriated. If that's what you call excitement and interest, okay. He's good at that. But he ducks a lot of fights. His resume's not that good. He's not that great defensive fighter.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
No one
can do it better.
So news is that WBC super flyweight champion Bam Rodriguez will face IBF title holder Puma Martinez on the RIYADH season November card, which also features David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde and Devin Haney versus Brian Norman Jr., Virgil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis. They've penciled in William Cepeda versus Andy Cruz, but we'll see how Cepeda does against Shakur Stevenson, I guess, and Christian Mbili. So that card could be shaping up to be something special, but a lot of the fights are surrounded in speculation because Cepeda has got to get past Shakur Stevenson, and that's not a sure thing. Bam has to get past the South African WBO champion Cafu on July the 19th. A lot of people disagree with Turkey's method of making fights ahead of the fighters who've got fights before the fights he's making. But he's trying to give the fighters a schedule to work towards, which is good. He's trying to take the randomness out of the process and let the fights build anticipation amongst the media and the fans, and that's something boxing has lacked. And he knows he'll probably have to make adjustments to the fights he wants on the November card, and he'll make the adjustments as they need to be made. But one thing for sure, we know we're going to get some good fights on that November card, no matter how they've got to put the fights together. They don't always get it right. In hindsight, the Bacoli-Joseph Parker fight, Bacoli replacing Daniel at short notice, should have been thought out better, not just by Turkey, but by Billy Nelson and young Ben Shalom and Martin Bacoli himself. They're also trying to put that Abdullah Mason, Sam Noakes fight for the WBO lightweight title on the November card. I like that fight. I really like that fight.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
No one
can do it better.